Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head up to Örebro once again, which is a little bit out to the west of Stockholm, a good couple of hours further north than where I am in Sweden. And for this one we're revisiting a brewery that I only discovered fairly recently, but it turns out they're one of the more well established Swedish craft breweries and they also do some pretty good beer, so I was quite disappointed in myself for not reviewing anything from these guys before. But for this particular one we have one of my favourite traditional German beer styles. The last beer I reviewed from these guys was the Örebro Bitter, which I was really quite impressed with actually, and that's a style I don't even enjoy very much. So for this one we're going to return to Närke Kulturbryggeri and we're having a taste of their Doppelbock today. So this one is called the Grandios Manipulator and it comes in at 9% ABV, so it is a little bit heftier than some of the kind of regular German ones that you're going to get. Most of the ones you'll get in Germany, such as the Salvator, the trying to think what else, the Celebrator and a couple of the other ones, you know, most of them are actually around 7.5–8%, so this one is a little bit heftier than the ones you will find in Germany. So really curious to see how this one turns out actually. And as I say, the last beer I had from these guys, the Örebro Bitter, an English style bitter beer, that was pretty nice. So really very, as I say, very curious about this particular beer. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, a link to my other reviews that I've done from Närke Kulturbryggeri before. No doubt I will do some more in the near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're actually interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the German beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Närke Kulturbryggeri then. So as I mentioned to you earlier, these guys are based in Örebro and they were founded back in 2003. They've only very recently actually celebrated their 15th anniversary, and they did a beer with Uppigårds brewery from Dalarna to actually celebrate that, which was the first encounter I had with this brewery. But the company was founded by Håge Viktorsson and also Berit Karlsson, and Håge actually had a career as a photographer and an artist before he became a brewer. But Berit is the CEO of the company and she's also the chair of the Swedish Independent Brewers Association, the Sverige Oberoende Mikrobryggerier, if I'm pronouncing that correctly of course. But they've got a good pedigree in there, and you know, little did Håge know when he started up this company that he would actually become quite a, you know, a really well respected brewer within Sweden. But for a long time this brewery were only producing keg beer, but recently they began to produce bottled beer as well, which really helped them grow quite substantially after they bought the old brew kit from the Nynäs Brewery, who I believe are the oldest craft brewery in Sweden. But the brewery currently produce around 100,000 litres of beer per year, and they're particularly famous for the Kagen Stormax Porter, which was rated as the world's best beer for a long time on Rate Beer. They very recently released that again. There was only 400 bottles and unfortunately I couldn't get any of it, so I was pretty upset about that because I really wanted to review that one after reviewing the Turbo Kagen Stormax Porter that was a collaboration for Uppigårds, and these guys, I really wish I'd managed to get a bottle of that. But this beer was first produced back in 2004 as the Stormax Porter, but later it was aged in bourbon barrels and then it became known as the Kagen Stormax Porter, and that was the one that really kind of put this particular brewery on the map of course. But yeah, the other beers that they do tend to be either English or German styles from what I gather. The Porter of course is an old English style, and they've got things like this. I believe they've got a Dunkel and a Helles as well if I remember correctly, and you saw me review the Örebro Bitter before too. So like I say, most of their beers tend to be Old English or German styles. They don't seem to do IPAs and things like that all that much, but the beers I've tried so far, as I say, have been pretty good, and the Örebro Bitter was a really nice beer. That reminded me of the Bideru Bitter that I reviewed before, and as I say, a style that I don't particularly enjoy, but I have been impressed with the way the Swedes brew those English bitters with the American hops. It does seem to work out pretty nicely actually. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about Närke Kulturbryggeri just now. If you want to learn a little bit more, do check out the brewery website in the description below, and you can you know, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that too. But let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself. So like I mentioned, this one is a 9% Doppelbock beer. It's you know, there's not much else to mention about it other than what I've mentioned already. I do like the other thing, it's Var Voorzichtig. That's quite and I'm not sure that one. They do usually have something on the bottles of the that says it's not piss, basically, and I always found that quite funny. I'm not sure. Where is that, like your? I don't know if this means like your attention or something like that. But yeah, nicely presented beer. This one, it's almost like a little bit like an a brain scan or something. I think that's what this one is supposed to be, and with the name Grandios Manipulator, that would be kind of quite fitting actually. I'm sure that's supposed to be like some sort of kind of brain scan, an NMR brain scan or something like that. But yeah, plain bottle cap on this one. It says on the side here, best before the best before December 2019. So I'm drinking this one when it's well in date, but you know, when it's 9% Doppelbock, I'm sure you could age this for a little bit if you really wanted to. But let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious about this beer, like I've said a couple of times. Nice little bit of smoke on the opening there, and we'll get it out and into the glass. And I'll tell you straight away, as soon as you open that up, you get a little bit of that, you know, red fruity note. And what I'll say about the colour of this one, I'm curious about this. You know, this, as I said, this is supposed to be a Doppelbock, but I've come across beers like this before, where it's supposed to be a Doppelbock, but in terms of the actual flavour profile of the beer, it's just like a very, very strong single bock beer. And in terms of colour, first thing I'm thinking about this, I'm wondering, is it really dark enough? This one, in terms of colour, is definitely more like a single bock beer. The Doppelbocks always tend to be a little bit more mahogany than this. This beer is definitely almost, it's like a very dark blood orange more than anything. It is almost the same colour as a single bock beer. You can see there's a solid 2 fingers of a frothy, I would say kind of beigey, very slight sort of beigey, fawny tan head on this one. Not tan, tan's a bit too dark a descriptor for this one, but definitely more of an orangey red colour this one. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, and a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of that head there. But you know, overall, it looks pretty nice, but like I say, in terms of appearance, to me, this looks more like it is a single bock beer, and I do wonder in terms of the flavour of this one, if it will simply be a very strong single bock beer rather than a, you know, a kind of Doppelbock in terms of its flavour profile. But let's have a look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. Ooh, right, that smells kind of interesting. It's, when I shake this beer up, it's definitely got this big grainy, bready sort of presence to it, which is kind of interesting. It's, yeah, grainy notes, bready notes. It's not got that typical sort of dark brown sugar and things, and sometimes you can get a little bit of chocolate out of the Doppelbocks as well. The aroma profile on this one is completely different to a Doppelbock. Yeah, it does. If I was blind smelling that beer, I would think it was an English beer. I wouldn't think it was a German style beer at all, that, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. It does actually smell really quite similar to the, it smells really quite similar to the Örebro Bitter. But yeah, as I say, a little bit of bready note, a little bit of that brown bready quality. There is some brown sugars in there, a little touch of caramel and biscuit, something like that, but there is a good kind of grainy undertone to it, and you do not expect that from a Doppelbock. A Doppelbock is a lot more about sweet but also toasty brown sugars. And it's, you know, the Doppelbocks do not have that grainy element to it, that's the thing. In terms of hoppiness, there's a little touch of earthiness, there's a little bit of a grassy kind of freshness to the beer as well. There is some red fruit in there too. Even when I think about the single box that you would get in Germany, they don't have that kind of grainy earthiness that this beer has. And I am wondering a little bit about that, to be honest. Even in terms of the aroma, it doesn't really remind me of even a single bock beer, rather than anything. But as I always say, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But for me, I'm just very curious as to what this beer is going to throw up in terms of its flavour profile, because it's certainly not what I would expect in terms of the aroma profile from a German Doppelbock, or even a single bock, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's just see how we get on with this one then. So this one is the Doppelbock, the Grandios Manipulator from the Närke Kulturbryggeri up in Örebro, out to the west of Stockholm. Let's get stuck into this one then. Slange, skål. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure what to make of this beer at all. This isn't... I'll tell you straight away, it's not... It's not a German Doppelbock, and it's not a single bock either, or a Maibock, or anything like that. And I'll say, it is actually quite a nice beer, but it's... You know, if I was to drink this, as I said with when I was smelling that beer, if I was to drink this blind, I'd have no idea that that's a Doppelbock. I genuinely would not think this was a Doppelbock. The flavour profile of this one is not what I was expecting at all. I was thinking, you know, this would be a kind of, you know, a typical German Doppelbock. I'm trying to remember the brewery that does the Lunator. There is a Swedish Doppelbock that's called the Lunator, and the name of the brewery that does that has gone completely, and it's, you know, it's a little bit different in the mouthfeel, but it's unmistakably, flavour profile wise, a Doppelbock. This one, for me, I'm really just not sure what to make of that, and it's kind of strange. I have had Doppelbocks from different countries, like Japan for example. I think I've had one from Brazil at one point too, that Fabrizio sent me, but this, to me, it's not a Doppelbock, and I don't think even in terms of flavour profile, it is closer to a single bock, but I think even then you couldn't fit it into like the single bock, Maibock category or anything like that. But the tradition was in Germany that you had, the Germans never used to be allowed to brew beer during the summer months because they didn't have artificial refrigeration, of course, so they used to brew the beer at the end of, I think it was March, and then it used to be left to ferment in the rock cellars, and the cool rock cellars over the kind of summer months. And then they would bring it out for at the start of October, and that would be your Oktoberfest beer, and it would always be a little bit stronger. So there is a bit of a variance in the Doppelbocks, but for me, this one, the flavour profile just... It's not brown sugary enough. It's a lot more bready in this one, and even if you have the... it is closer, the flavour profile of this beer, to being a single bock. It does have some of the breadiness of that, and it does have a little bit of the brown sugar, but it just, this beer to me tastes a little bit more English than it does German, to be quite frank, definitely. Yeah, it does have a little bit of that German smoothness, but the way the malt grains and stuff are coming out in this beer, it's more of a German beer. It's more of an English beer rather. It just does not have the same. It just does not have the character of a German beer. I think that's fair to say. But let's try and break this one down a little bit. So in the middle of your palate then, you can feel there's this sort of bready quality, and that just blankets the middle of your palate. The further into this beer you go, it becomes a little bit more kind of grainy and things like that. And you know, you get a little more of this kind of grainy. It's not quite rye, but it's not too far away from rye in terms of its flavour. That's mainly what the malt base is made of. Right in the centre of your palate, you have got a little bit of a sweeter kind of caramel. Maybe there's a little hint of a kind of toasty note to this one as well. Yeah, there is a little bit of a slightly toasty caramel note to this one, but the grainy notes really start to push their way up out of the base of the flavour of this one, and this, say, the graininess, there is almost a little bit of bitterness from the grainy character in this beer as well. But yeah, there's a little bit of biscuit there as you go out from the centre of your palate. You get a little bit of biscuit pushing out towards the edge of the palate there, but there's maybe a little touch, there's a very light little touch of a slightly woody flavour to this one the further forward you go on the palate as well. On the hoppy side of things, back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of earthiness. The smoothness just spreads forward a little bit. It almost gives you a little bit of a... it almost has a little bit of a herbal quality in there, and when you get to the front corners of the palate, it's... there is a little touch of floral note, and then round the very front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and grassy, I would say. And yeah, On the behind the front curve of the palate, of course, that's where you get that little oily bubble where those juicy kind of fruity esters come out of the beer. And for me, this one, it does have a little bit of that. It does have a little bit of a red fruity quality. It's a bit more like a kind of sort of phenol-y, cough medicine-y type thing that comes out of this one. Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of a. I think there is a little bit of a kind of candied red fruit to this one. As like I say, the little heart-shaped sweets you get in Haribo Star Mix. There is a little bit of a kind of raisiny or plummy, juicy thing coming out of this beer too. But overall, it's even in terms of stylistically, like I say, comparing this beer to a single Bock in Germany, I don't think it is closer to that than it is to the Doppelbock, but at the same time, it doesn't really kind of live up to that. Even the way the hops are coming out for me, I think there might be a little bit of noble hop in this, but from the earthiness and the sort of herbal quality that's in the hoppy side of this beer, and to me it screams out English hops rather than German hops. I might be completely wrong on that, but to me just the character of this beer is far more English than it is German, and if it's a Doppelbock, that doesn't fit for me. If it's meant to be a Doppelbock, it just doesn't fit. I mean, I had recently I reviewed the Bambergator from Faisla, from Brauerei Faisla in Bamberg, and that was just a kind of strong single Bock beer, but it had that characteristic smoothness that you expect of the German beers. This one, to me, in the malt base, just comes across as being a little bit more grainy and things like that. It's definitely closer to a single Bock beer. It has some of that character, but to me, if it's a Doppelbock beer, it should be a lot more rich in brown sugars. It should be a lot sweeter than it is, and it should have a lot kind of more red fruit and stuff like that too as well. And the hops, I think, shouldn't be quite as earthy and as herbal as that. I think there's been some English ingredients used in this, and to be honest, I don't think it suits the style of beer that they're going for here. But in terms of the mouthfeel, then I think mid-bodied. Yeah, mid-bodied beer. Carbonation's very smooth. Overall, the mouthfeel is quite smooth. It has a little bit of wetness to it, but mainly it is quite smooth. The malt base does have a little bit of smoothness to it, but it's a little bit more grainy. Hops, there's a little bit of bitterness in there. I'd guess somewhere around 30-ish IBUs. The further I go into this beer, the hoppiness also becomes a little bit more ashy. I wouldn't be surprised if there's Fugel's hops in there. Just going from the flavour of this one, it definitely does have a little bit of that almost ashy, earthy quality to it, which again you shouldn't have in German beers. But yeah, there's a little bit of hoppy bitterness to this one, and there's a little bit of a red kind of fruity note in there. It's got a bit of that candied red fruit, a little bit of a kind of strawberry-ish type thing. But overall, it's an okay beer. But if you're going to market it as a Doppelbock, it shouldn't have this kind of English quality to it. It should be a German beer. This beer, it's one that I would think, if I tasted this blind, I would guess that it's an English bitter. I would not guess that this is a Doppelbock or even a single Bock. It does have some of that single Bock quality, but to me it tastes like one of these bitters that you get in the kind of kegs in England. It doesn't, or cask beers rather, not kegs. It reminds me of one of these kind of pool cask beers, an English bitter rather than being a keg German Doppelbock. So in a way, it's a little bit disappointing actually, this one, just because if it's a Doppelbock, it should be German. It shouldn't have this English quality to it. But that's just my opinion. In terms of the beer itself, it's actually okay. It's drinkable. The flavour profile is nice, but don't market it as a Doppelbock if it's not. That would be my kind of clear message with this one. But their other beer, like I say, the Närke, the Närke Örebro Bitter was really, really good. But for me, this one, I'll be honest, is a little bit of a disappointment. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. I would like to try their Kagen Dormax Porter. Like I say, that's supposed to be very, very good. But for me, this one, I was expecting something different. I will say that when it's marketed as a Doppelbock, it should be a German beer rather than having this English character to it. But yeah, can't really, in terms of drinkability and stuff, it's okay, but it's not I just do not think this beer should be marketed as a Doppelbock. It should be like a strong English bitter or something like that. That's what it should be marketed as, or even just a single, strong single bock or something like that at most. But yeah, overall, it's an interesting beer. This one, it was cool to try it. Yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. And you know, it's a good. These guys are a good brewery. You don't want to kind of push it too far when it comes to things like this. But yeah, interesting to review this one. I hope you guys have enjoyed my take on this beer. Let me know your own thoughts on this one in the comment section below. I'd be very interested to hear your own thoughts on this beer as well, because it's been interesting for me to review and think about a little bit. But as I say, just not what I expected at all. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from the Närke Kulturbryggeri as well. Do check out the Örebro Bitter. The Örebro Bitter is a really pretty solid beer, I have to say. And you know, this one is a nice beer, but you know, it's the marketing that annoys me about this one a little bit. But yeah, have a try some of the beers from this brewery. They do some really quality stuff, and I do hope that I can review the Kagan Stormax Porter at some point fairly soon. But thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys later. This was the Doppelbock, the Grandios Manipulator from Närke Kulturbryggeri in Örebro here in Sweden. Until the next time, slans just now, and I will catch you guys very soon. Skål!